Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride. Let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/165, and you can email the show, pedalshift@pedalshift.net, or call the voicemail hotline, 202-930-1109. Check Pedalshift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 165th edition of the Pedalshift Project. You can tell I am excited to be back behind a microphone. It has been weeks since I have talked to you sort of like this. I mean, I did all of that hard work to make sure that you had podcasts while I was gone, and then I was gone for 2 weeks, and I recorded all sorts of audio, but not behind my favorite little microphone here, and, well, it's time. It's time you heard about this trip. Now, I'm hoping that many, if not all of you, got a chance to take a look on social media. So I was on the Book of Faces, I was on the Twitter, I was on your Gram, your Instas, all that. And you can learn a lot from all of that. But of course, you mostly, if you're listening to the pod, you're probably used to hearing about things rather than reading about things and seeing them. So here I am. Pedalshift Tour Journals, Volume 14. This is the 14th tour journal that I've done in the history of this podcast. By the way, we're rounding the corner to 5 years next month, in a few weeks even. I think it was June 5th. I'll have to check that out. But the 5-year anniversary is going to be sort of celebrated by doing Pedalshift Tour Journals Volume 14. Not 15, but 14. We'll do 15 eventually here. So this is going to be a 5-parter, it turns out. The next 5 weeks will feature the tour from Washington, D.C. to Cincinnati, Ohio, that happened to link together 3 of the great trails of the eastern United States. We're starting off with this episode with the C&O Towpath. I talk about it a lot on the show. It is featured fully and completely on this here episode, part 1. Next week, when you tune in, hopefully, it will be the Great Allegheny Passage, plus a little bit more as well. And then there's going to be 2 parts following that, doing the Ohio to Erie Trail, since that was new to me. Also, it was several days longer than either of these other 2 trails. And then we're going to be doing a wrap-up show. So 5 parts, 5 parts all together. If you would like to hear a preview of the ride, please go back a few episodes, check out Pedalshift episode 162. That would be pedalshift.net/162. But I'm going to summarize. I did it a little bit more verbosely in 162, but here we go. Summarize. I rode a fully loaded Novara Safari. That is my big bike. That is a Sequoia Sempervirens. If you are playing the home game, you've heard the name of the bike before. I planned to camp every single night, but I was open to roofs over my head. I started at home, where I'm sitting right now in Washington, D.C., and I had no 0 days planned, but there was the possibility of earning a 0 day through some deviations. There were also some opportunities if I needed to catch up, if I needed to cut off some corners, but I was hoping not to do that. The ride was to end in Cincinnati, and I was going to be taking the train home overnight. Spoiler alert, I made it. I'm sitting here right now, but how did it go? You've got 5 episodes to learn about this. This was the longest tour that I've done since 2014. Similar in length to some of my Portland to San Francisco rides that I've done since then, though. So one of these days I should actually measure this, but it did feel longer than I've done in a while, and it felt great. All of the show notes will have all of my journaling notes from my ride. I did this journal a bit differently this time. I did not do little 2 and 5 minute segments and then kind of laboriously pasted them all together and edited them together. Instead, I did 2, sometimes 1 entry a day that gave a lot more, I think, easily digestible summary of what had happened prior to that. I think it also was beneficial because there was less repetition, and because when you get bike touring brain, man, you forget what you talked about. So this was much, much better. So check out the show notes. This episode will be /165. Of course, the episode number is always the show notes for any given episode. So go check those out if you'd like to see the written version of what I ended up yammering about here. Pedalshift Plus, Pedalshift Society, folks. here is something of a bonus to you. You've already heard a lot of this, but what I want you to do is I want you to keep that bonus feed, that bonus podcast feed that you had where you heard all of this stuff. You'll notice things are going to be edited down a little bit more, but what I'm going to do for you is you'll get a special bonus podcast with each episode. It's going to be sort of like a plus addition to each entry here. It's going to be kind of a summary of my thoughts now that I'm off the bike, now that I've been away from it for a week or more, so that you can kind of get my idea on how each of the trails went for me and my thoughts on all of that. If you are not a member of the Pedalshift Society, go to pedalshift.net/society. If you join any time during this run of episodes from 165 through, well, whatever 5 episodes are down the line. I guess that's 169. Am I doing the math right? Or is it the other way around? Anyways, into the late 160s. If you join at any time during that, you will get this feed. It will probably lop off of the old episodes at some point, but stay tuned. You will be getting those bonus episodes on that feed. Just sign up for Pedalshift Society. Again, if you're a member of the Pedalshift Society and somehow missed my email with this special bonus feed exclusively for you, please feel free to reach out to me at pedalshift@pedalshift.net. All right, that is it. We are going to jump into the first part of this tour journal. It is the complete through ride of the C&O. From about mile marker 27 on the C&O Towpath, it is day 1 kicking off. May 1st. I hope I don't end up regretting what my riding gear ended up being. I think partially because over the last year or so, I have gotten away from sort of fully loaded touring and have gotten into a little bit more of a modified bike packing setup. And there's nothing wrong with any of these versions. It's just sort of like, what's your ride going to be? And I think as I've reflected a bit on it, I'm going away for a lot longer, and I kind of wanted to have more waterproof bag options and more space as necessary. I'm just not as cleanly set up, and I think part of it is that I could probably fit a few things that are sort of loosely bungeed to the rear of the bike into one of the panniers, which may end up happening in day 2 to 3 and on. So we'll kind of see how that all goes, especially as we start getting into some kind of rain. But I will say I'm riding heavier than I have in the past, and I'm feeling it a little bit. It's not that bad, but no big deal. The weather has been much, much cooler than anticipated. Now, I guess it is supposed to get up into maybe the 70s or so. Maybe not even, but it is downright cool. I may even be throwing on a jacket as I sit here. Very overcast. And it's a function of the weather forecast being really, really not on point. And this area is tough to forecast. I'm a big fan of the Capital Weather Gang. If I'm ever riding in the DC area and you ever want to see what's going on, the weather-wise, the Capital Weather Gang is your sort of go-to. My weather nerds, as I call them. Plane you may be hearing is landing at Dulles Airport, which is just over my left shoulder here on the other side of the Potomac in Virginia. The forecasts have been all over the map. Today was originally going to be 90 degrees and maybe some rain. Well, today it's much cooler and probably no rain. So I think that things are going to be quite variable because the front that's sort of hopscotching the DC area is really making things, well, different and tough to predict. So I'm glad I got the weather app that I've got, the Dark Sky app. I think that's going to be helpful. Looks like Friday has a really strong chance of some rain. So as I roll into Cumberland, I may be getting wet. So we'll just kind of see how that all goes. But, all's good, all's good. There's one nice thing about having a little bit of rain in the last couple of days, and it rained just a touch here and there, is that the trail is just moist enough to not be super soft, but all the dust is down. And, just even looking at my bike, kind of looking down at the water bottle that's on the bottom of the tube there, it's not even kicking up any dust to speak of at all, which is really unusual for this trail. So that's kind of good. So it's a less messy ride. Now, we get a little bit of rain, things will change in a hurry. Where I'm at right now, I'll call it the 25 to 35 section. That is a little bit moister than the earlier parts of the trail, but really not bad considering last year. Last year, this was the section of the trail that just ended my ride. I mean, it was just so terrible and so sticky. The mud here is like clay, like a really thick clay. Very tough to cycle through. Now, I've got a different set of fenders on right now, which aren't as tight to the tires, which is a lot better on the C&O. You have really tight to your tires fenders. The C&O is going to just jam those up real quick, and it's just not a good look at all. Passed by Swains Lock campground to get to this point. That's the mile marker 16 or so. First one that you get to outside of DC that is doable for non-group sites. And it was really great. There was a scout project for a recycling box, just a little cardboard recycling box. The bad look that was happening there was some of the a-hole campers that had been there put garbage in there. And that's just a terrible look. I mean, what's worse is that there's a parking lot right there. So, it could have been car campers for crying out loud. I mean, it was unfortunate. If I wasn't going to be going, so many more miles, I would have grabbed the garbage myself, but I'm sure someone will. There's usually some trail rangers that will be going through there, but bad luck. Cart out your garbage if you take it in. A lot of birders are on the trail today, and I will say they've been excellent. First of all, they're seeing some wonderful sights. I've seen some egrets, some blue herons, tons of cardinals. It is bird city here in this section of the towpath. It's just been fantastic, and they've been getting some good sights. I'm sure they're seeing some more exotic things than I am. But the one thing I will give them a shout out on, there are large groups, a bunch of large groups that I've gone through, and they've been really good sharing the trail, which I really, really appreciate. I try to share the trail. I hope others do too. I don't always run into that, so that was really good. I had a huge breakfast this morning before I took off. My dog is apparently, Bellstar is just in mourning right now, waiting for me by the door. It's going to be a while. As I rolled off, that was kind of sad. But the big breakfast that I had was burnt off by about mile marker 25 or so. Just a couple, really 2 miles back, I stopped to eat. So I'm taking yet another break here. I feel much better now. I stopped for that snack. I've got lunch in here. I made an egg wrap, which it was the second half of the large scramble that I made. So that'll be good. I'll probably have that. I may have that as early as Whites Ferry, which is about maybe 8 more miles down here. That'd be a little bit past the halfway point, but we'll kind of see. The big issue, of course, I'm looking forward to today is crossing around mile marker 52, that outage. It's cooler than I would have liked, but I think it'll be warmer, obviously, the time I get there. So I'm going to have to get a little wet, but it does not look like any rain, which means that we're not going to have really high conditions. So I anticipate being able to get through that with a little bit of effort, and I think it'll be all good. And that's really the only, I think, stress point that I've got for these first few days. And that's here on day 1. And once I get through that, it's all good. Paw Paw Tunnel on day 3 will be open. Yeah, I may have to wait a little bit, but that's okay. So, C&O, man, it's just so great. I really enjoy riding this trail. I'm so happy that I'm going to be able to do a through ride so early this year, because last year I barely rode it at all because the conditions were so bad. So if it does end up being super wet and stuff sucks for the rest of the year, I'll at least have gotten a through ride in here early in the season in 2019. From the C&O mile marker 62.9, but who's counting, Huckleberry Hill campground. I am all by my lonesome here. This is the end of day 1 of the great Cincinnati ride. Hey, what a fun day of riding. I have to say, what made it, before I sort of get into everything here for the second half of the day, I haven't ridden this section of the trail in well over a year. I missed this section last year. I think I've mentioned this before, but the trail conditions last year were so terrible that I didn't really get on the trail very much at all. Very, very little C&O riding. The least amount since 2011, for sure. It was almost like a piece of my bike touring jam was missing as a result of that. So it's like hanging out with an old friend again. I've always considered the C&O my buddy, and so to be able to do this ride, which I haven't done in completion since the 2017 season, I'll tell you, it was really, really nice to be able to do that all over again.
And on top of that, I was able to do some new things. So just an A-plus kind of day. So second half of the day since I last reported in, almost immediately after I finished recording the first section, I ran into a cloud of gnats. And this is a thing that is typical during this time of year. And what'll happen is you'll ride through a cloud of them. They tend to breed in the canal prism area, especially when it becomes a little bit swampier. Of course, the canal is not filled in all parts, but where it gets a little bit of water, that's where it's going to breed your mosquitoes and your gnats. And it's funny because the mosquitoes aren't that big of a deal so far on this trip, but the gnats are pretty crazy. I am reminded, I think this might have been the first year I was riding and I was training on the C&O a lot with Mysterious James. When we were in this very campground, when we were riding back and forth between here and Harper's Ferry, we actually had to wear sunglasses and tie bandanas around our mouths like, we were like Billy the Kid and shit. It was kind of crazy to be able to just ride. It was kind of nuts. And oh, by the way, that was at night too, which was nuts. So the gnats are back, and they're just they live here too, man. That's just how it goes. I passed by Chisel Branch Campground during this portion of the ride, pre-pedal shift. Or at least pre-podcast, I got caught in a flooded river situation and woke up one morning, famously, I would think at this point, if you've been listening to the show at all, and my tent was surrounded in water, and I put my hand down, and it was like a waterbed. There's so much water under the tent. So going by it today when it was completely dry, I'm always reminded of that, and I looked back where the fish jumped out in the middle of the trail. It was kind of fun. Chisel Branch Campground. The new trail surface, there's two spots where there's new trail surface. The first was in the 40s, and I just have to say it comes after Chisel Branch and goes right about to the we'll call it the Whites Ferry, to Whites Ferry basically. It is chef's kiss awesome. I mean, just fantastic. Very reminiscent of the Gap. One thing I'll mention is that one of the arguments that a lot of folks have made, me included, about not doing a huge wholesale resurfacing of the C&O is that the Park Service has for years maintained that they're doing this out of a notion of historical accuracy of the towpath. Well, I have to be honest, I think that argument has gone the way of the dodo. There are parts of this towpath, the two resurfaced areas most notably, plus Big Slackwater, which is a big concrete edifice, that are nowhere near what the historic towpath was. I think there are sections of the towpath that they will never resurface just because they get flooded so much. High Chisel Branch. So I will say these sections of the path they're better than the Great Allegheny Passage. They are fantastic. Now, maybe it's just because they're so new and they take care of sections of trail that were just like root-laden and really shitty before, but now they're really fantastic. So, yeah, I'm a huge fan of the resurfacing. The other resurfacing was between Brunswick and close to Harper's Ferry. Yeah, really fantastic sections, really well done. Big ups to the Park Service on that. Whites Ferry Grille, this is around mile marker 35 or so. That's where the cable ferry crosses to Leesburg. The Whites Ferry's Grille was, there was a sign up that said coming soon. Last time I was there, the door had been kicked in and it had been broken in. So take it with a grain of salt what coming soon means. But the soda machine was back, which was different than last time. So I got something cold to drink, which was nice. It is, and it was all day straight up cold. It's been slowly creeping up into the mid 60s, but it's been gray and really, really strangely chilly. Reminder that the forecast for a lot of the days leading up to this said that today was going to be flirting with 90. Yeah, that did not happen. It's going to be about this all night long, and I don't think it's going to drop below 68. It's kind of on the muggy side. It wasn't a comfortable cool. It was fine, but it was funny. I found myself putting on my puffy vest, and that was helpful, but then you get hot and you take it off and whatnot. I was in short sleeves and long pants for most of the day. May is a weird month. It just is what it is. Keeping up with my hydration and my electrolytes, I felt pretty good most of the day for a day one ride. And the second part, I got a little bit fatigued towards the end, but everything was fine. I think that I did a good job today of feeding myself enough food and drinking enough water and taking care of my electrolyte situation. Well, right now I'm drinking something a little bit different than water. We'll get to that in a moment. 40s, the mile marker 40 through 49. The trail got a little bit wetter. It was muddy in parts, but I would say it was a firm mud. It wasn't a sloppy mud, so everything was totally fine. Again, we got some rain maybe 3-4 days ago of note, and it was still in that area. It was not bad, and it was not an issue. There was one massive mud hole, but for the most part, it was just fine. I would say trail conditions are excellent throughout this latter portion of the trail, this DC side of the trail. I passed by mile marker 44. I'm just going to say this, folks. There's an Easter egg on the mile marker 44. I'm just saying, if you're on the C&O and you're a Pedalshift fan, take a gander at the mile marker 44 marker. You should look around it, but the Easter egg is still there. Just saying. Mile marker 52, it's actually about 52 and a half. The crossing, the outage, the thing that has been bothering me for days, because if the water level's high, it's a real pain in the butt. But because we haven't had rain in a while, the crossing was a real piece of cake. It was shallow. It was not much deeper than it was in the summer when I could hop on rocks. I didn't even need to get wet. But this time, of course, I had to bring the bike across. And, I sat there and I looked at it and I hemmed and hawed and I thought, oh, I could get out my waterproof socks or put on flip-flops. And then I was just like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to go through it. And so I had wet shoes and socks for, until basically now. And it was fine. I mean, it's just not a big deal. It was no worse than getting caught in a rainstorm. So, but it was quick. It was easy. The bank on the DC side was steep-ish and slippery-ish, but you just go down with your bike on and squeeze the brakes as you go down and just kind of let it up as you roll a couple inches at a time. It was fine. Very interesting. There was a guy that was a contractor there. The contractor was about to be putting in a bid for the repair, not for a low-level crossing, but for the full repair of that, basically the bridge that goes over. And we were talking, and I said, "Don't tell me if you can't tell me." But what would be the timeline on such a thing? He basically said, 2 to 3 months from when it was started. Now, it may not be him; it may be somebody else that ends up getting the bid. But important to know that if you're planning on doing the C&O this year, great news is money is going to a contractor to do that repair. It looks like they may not even be doing the low-level one. I don't know if that's the case or not. But the full repair is in the works, but it's probably not going to be until the end of the summer. And Triple P, Preston, my guy in the know in the Shepherdstown area, which is about mid-trail. Well, I shouldn't say mid-trail. It's about in the 70s, mile marker 70s or so. He's always in contact with the folks over at the Park Service, with the C&O folks. And they're apparently saying September. And that sounds about right based on what I heard. So that's good to know. I would not be afraid of crossing that creek. I would be mindful if there's been a ton of rain within 2 to 3 days prior to your crossing. That's when the water levels are going to be higher and it's just going to be too hard to go. Today, piece of cake, no problem at all. Not far from there was Brunswick. I got pizza and beer. The pizza, I'm going to give about 3. They say there's no such thing as bad pizza. Well, it's. Let me just put it this way: if I hadn't been riding 62.9 miles today plus, I don't know if I would have been so down with it. But right next to it was Smoketown Brewing Station. I have to say, I'm giving them a 9 out of 10. Huge selection. This was the new thing that I alluded to at the top of the show. Huge selection, really great folks there. They had crowlers, which had me thinking, you know what, I don't like to drink and then bike some more. And I had about, maybe 7-8 miles to go till camp. And I just don't like, even having a pint, I bike terribly after a beer. So I decided to bite the bullet and I got a little bit more beer than I would normally drink, but it wasn't that much more expensive at all compared to a pint. Got their pale ale, which was their hoppiest beer, and it isn't malty like their IPAs. Really good. I'm very much a fan of it. It is the Ash Can Pale Ale, and again, this is the Smoketown Brewing Station. I don't know how long they've been there, but it seems like they've been there for more than a minute, and I'm really impressed with them. I would say this. Go to Harper's Ferry. If you've never been to the area, you should see it. It's historic. It's interesting. It's cool. But the stuff on the other, to get to the other side there, you have to go up this enormous spiral staircase. And if you're going to bring your fully loaded bike, I've called it the Hillary Step before. It's just a joke. It's just, it's a lugging your thing up. It's like climbing that part of Everest, one of the hardest parts of Everest. There's. I don't want to disrespect the businesses on that side of the river, especially since I have West Virginia ties. But I will say Brunswick has just really, they've got some great stuff going on there. They've got the pizza place. They've got an ice cream place. They've got a little market there on the main street. Brunswick's a legit stop, and it's much easier than Harper's Ferry. And if you're in the market to get some dinner before doing campground. This is, of course, if you're coming from the DC direction, you can't go wrong with that. Now, if you're going the opposite direction, if you're coming, that could be a good stop if you're staying at Huckleberry Hill to go there for breakfast, because there's a great coffee shop there that's built in an old church. Beans in the Belfry, good stuff. So Brunswick's a legit stop. I would recommend. I mentioned this, the great resurfacing out of Brunswick. I have nothing but great things to say about this resurfacing. I don't know if that's in the cards for the full trail. We will see, but I would be super down with that if they wanted to resurface the problematic areas. Like, just if they could do that, I think that would be really good. Again, you wouldn't want to do this in the areas that historically get flooded out, because it's just going to be a waste of money. It's going to get washed away. But in the areas where there's, just tons of rocks and roots and things like that, man, it is really nice. And it is, I'm going to say it, folks, fans of the Great Allegheny Passage, I'll take this part of the trail over any of that. So there's that. The final part here, rolling into the Harper's Ferry area. Of course, I'm on the Maryland side. Saw some Appalachian trail hikers, AT hikers. This part of the trail actually is shared with the Appalachian Trail. So you get to see some fun things. You get to see some beards, some serious beards, man, and some backpacks, and it's cool. Every once in a while, I'll see some some hikers camping here, but a lot of them will stay in Harper's Ferry at the hostel because it's a great resupply area, and that's what they tend to do. So you don't tend to hang out with them a lot, but it's real fun because I feel like we're kind of cut from the same cloth, the through hikers and the folks who do some bike touring. So that was really cool. And as I mentioned, I had Huckleberry Hill here all to myself, which is why I'm able to record this without doing it really quiet in my tent, which is great. Well, I have to say, all to myself and the Gnats. And that, kids, is what we call a bookend, because I started with Gnats, I'm ending with Gnats.
May 2nd, about noon, from Appoquan Junction Hiker-Biker Campground. It's about mile marker 91 or so. A much muddier ride. I will say that the day today has been a little bit much slower than yesterday. And, it's fine. It just makes it for a little bit less enjoyable kind of riding. Last night, I was just really surprised. And yes, it's early in the season and it's midweek, but literally nobody passed the camp last night from 6 p.m. when I got there on. No runners, no bikers, nobody. I had the camp completely to myself. That's unusual. Normally, that's a campground that I share with a fair number of people. Weird even for a Wednesday, but yeah, that's what it was. And it was kind of nice to be able to just have the space to myself and all of that. Last thing I did before I went to sleep, and I haven't mentioned this yet, was that I'm trying out a new method of basically eating. I'm trying to do work with cold soaking. And I think I'm enjoying it to a certain extent. It certainly is a lot easier. I've got some steel-cut oats that I basically just put in an old peanut butter jar, plastic, just because it's lighter, and then I fill it up with water to a little bit above
the level the oats are in, and just let it soak overnight. And it's chewy, it's nice, it's got some real heft to it. And of course, the bonus part is I don't have to cook anything in the morning. You can mix it up with some hot water and heat it up if you'd like. I just didn't feel the need to. I had a banana as well. Cut some of that up and put that in there, and it was great. So cold soaking, really enjoying that as an alternate method. When I woke up this morning, it was a little bit after 5:30 or so. The morning twilight was starting. Unzipped, came out of the tent, and it was just a big bank of fog. And it didn't dissipate until several hours later. It was probably not until maybe about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning before it really burnt off. Just solid fog on the river and elsewhere, and just everything was covered with that fine mist, which was fine. You well know I prefer a little bit of a foggy start. It was not unlike the Pacific Coast in the summer, which was kind of fun. I was out of the camp by about 7:30, which was relatively, well, I wouldn't say quick. I made breakfast. I made a cup of coffee. I cleaned myself up a little bit, got a little bit more organized with how I repacked things. I had some wet clothes. I had some garbage, so I had that hanging off the bike. Usually my day 2 look is a lot gnarlier than my day 1. I decided that since I had had my breakfast and that it was relatively early, the only thing that would be open in Shepherdstown, I think, would be the bakery, which would be fine and certainly lovely to get. But I had plenty of food, and I decided that I was going to make that work for me. Big fan of Shepherdstown, but because of the hour and just wanting to make some miles earlier, since it was going to be warmer, I decided to give that up. The trail from that point on really got a lot muddier in parts. Around mile marker 78, it was washed out so badly that it just revealed the large rocks below it. It was almost like riding in a creek bed, a dried out creek bed. It was a very strange thing. It was definitely the worst surface I've encountered really on the trail at all, because it stops being a trail and more kind of a mountain bike route. It was very bizarre. Went by Horeshoe Bend campground, which is in the late 70s, early 80s, mile marker wides, and there was a new sign there that said, "One night only, no alcohol," which I thought was peculiar because it was, I think, one of the ones that's actually quite a bit of ways from a drive-in area. So interestingly, I've never seen and still have not seen that similar sign at any of the other campgrounds. So I'm just wondering if there has been particular problems with that the Park Service has dealt with. But anyways, took a picture of it. It was novel to me. Taylor's Landing, around that area, that's a river access part. Man, that whole area, it was scraped right down the trail, and there was a bobcat working it. So my best guess is that it's going to be the next candidate for some resurfacing, which would be nice because those resurfaced areas really are good. The rest of the trail up to the point where I'm at right now really got soft in parts. There were a few times, especially when there are some downgrades, meaning downhill areas, where keeping control of the bike was a little tricky. Went through Big Slackwater, and that was, of course, a lot of fun. And it's nice because Big Slackwater is on concrete slabs in parts, and you fly comparatively on that. My mileage rate is really low. It's well below 10 miles per hour. I haven't done the math to figure it out yet. I really expected to be in Williamsport by noon, and because let's see, I left at 7:30, and that's yeah. I'm slow. I'm not taking a ton of breaks, and I'm definitely slow. I've stopped to refill water bottles a bunch of times, and because I don't care for the taste of the iodine in the water, I put it in my filtered water bottle, and then I'll squeeze it out into the others, and then just make sure I've got all reasonably decent tasting water. Trust me, it's not that great. I ran into a group of 3 who are doing the Eastern Express, which I think I'm really fascinated. I gave them some stickers. Kind of a fun moment. I said, I interviewed the guy who came up with that on my show, and they're like, oh wait, we've heard that show, Pedalshift. So that was fun. So I think we're going to be playing hopscotch for a while, because they're going to be taking this trail and then the Gap all the way across. Now, I think they're going to be staying in some hotels, and they're going to be taking some 0 days that I'm not planning on doing. So I may be getting past them within the next day or two. Very nice group. And of course, they're going to be going much further than me, all the way out to Oregon. So that's kind of fun. So as I sit here, I'm probably a little bit less than an hour. Well, who knows? Maybe about an hour away from Williamsport. And I decided to stop because feeling a little fatigued. The
last of the mediocre pizza from last night was calling me. I'm telling you, every piece towards the end here has gotten better and better. Cold pizza, for whatever reason, way better than the hot stuff sometimes. So I'm going to do this. Hopefully I'll get some energy after a bit of a break. I mean, I've been going for quite a while here, so a little extended break would be nice. Sun's poking out, starting to get a little bit nicer. Maybe I'll take off my shoes and see if I can get those to finally dry out after yesterday's creek traversing. But everything's going great so far. I've got some work requests already from folks, from clients. So it's like, okay, I'll get back to you. I told you I was going to be on this trip. Might be difficult, but we'll see what we can do. So day 2. Who had day 2 in the pool for that? Oh, I should mention, last night there was a thunderstorm, a very gnarly one that passed close enough that there was the thunder and the lightning, but it was north of us so that there was no rain. Of course, the trail went through those areas. So that's why it's been so muddy. From White Rock Hiker-Biker Campsite just outside of Hancock, Maryland, it's the end of day 2. And it was, we're going to say it kicked my butt. It was much warmer today, and it was probably in the mid-80s, I would say, give or take, and with a lot of direct sun and high humidity, and oh yeah, the trail conditions degraded quite a bit. So that kind of made today long and hard, and as a result, you know, I kind of limped into Hancock, and well, here I am. Played hopscotch with the Eastern Express trio throughout the day. I don't know how it happened. It felt like they were way ahead of me, but I must have been making good time here and there, especially around Williamsport. They may have taken a longer break there. As I mentioned, the trail was really muddy in parts, and it had me looking forward to the Western Maryland Rail Trail, which runs parallel to the C&O and is paved, and it was good to get to that, but I'll get to that in a second. As I mentioned, it was kind of a long second half. It really contrasted the heat and humidity of the second half of the day with the first half being so foggy and cool. And I just wasn't used to it. It reminded me a lot of last year in the beginning parts of my tour in Missouri. A little bit of a struggle, but made it just fine. And I feel good now, but I definitely maxed out. I took a break in Williamsport, and I dried out my shoes, which really felt good. To be able to put my feet back into dry shoes for the first time since marker 52. That was pretty great. I also, in Williamsport, got fresh non-C&O water, and I have to say, there is something in the iodine or something in the well water that does not agree with me very well. So I'm making stricter attempts to get city water, basically, when I can. Now, tomorrow, I'm not going to have that much of an opportunity. I did fill up my bladder a little bit, so I may be able to be okay, depending on how much water I ingest tomorrow. Now, tomorrow's going to be not as hot as today, and there's going to be rain, so we'll see how it all goes. Of course, I will drink the water if I need to, but, you know, the second I start drinking that C&O water, throws me off, throws my system off. Something doesn't agree with it. And I do filter it as well. So I'm not sure. I may need to bring my Sawyer next time and see if that helps me, because the Brita filter wasn't cutting it for me tonight or today. There's a large detour in Williamsport right now that forces you up the hill into town. And it was funny because I was resisting going up there. I decided not to take a lunch break. Or a break where I would stop at my usual, which is the Desert Rose Cafe. As it turned out, I needed to go right past it anyways, so I should have just done that. I would have cooled down and probably would have benefited from it, but it was fine. I missed the closing time at C&O Bikes, but the bike was fine. I was toying with staying there. They have a bunkhouse. I think it's like $15, which is relatively steep for a bunkhouse, but you get a shower and you get a whole bunch of other things that come with that. I'm going to try and stay there at some other point. It turned out I was able to kind of do a little sink shower in the city park here, and I'm still sticky because, of course, I had to bike an extra 2 miles to get to the campground, and in the humidity here, I just sweated it up again. So shower tomorrow, I think, is in the cards. I sat for a while on a bench about 5 miles outside of Hancock, and I was just listening to traffic on I-70 whiz by as I was just sort of recovering. And then I ended up doing those 5 miles and went to a new to me restaurant, which was perfectly fine. I
got something a little bit too heavy. I got a Reuben, but I only ate half of it, so I'll have the other half for tomorrow. I also went to Subway to get a footlong so that I am all set for food tomorrow. I hope. I do have one more bar left, and I've got a big jar of peanut butter and some, wrap stuff. So, I have plenty of food. It's a question, will I want to eat it tomorrow? Because there's a point where my body just sort of shuts down and I need food, but I am uninterested in eating it. It's probably the pre-bonk stage, but today was rough like that. And of course, my body is not really digesting the half Reuben that I had, probably because I was stupid and got a beer, but hey, whatever. Yeah, that was the end of day 2. I would say really marked contrast to yesterday in terms of the weather. DC apparently got hammered with really serious, real deal thunderstorms, and I was, away from all of that. Tomorrow it looks like the forecast is looking like some rain. So my intention is to get up as early as I can and go just to see what I can do. I've got the Paw Paw Tunnel to go through, and there's very little between here and Cumberland, but I really would like to bang out those miles. Got about 58 or so. So it's the shortest day. I did the extra bit of mileage here to get on the other side of Hancock and did the prep for that by getting the food for tomorrow. So we'll just see how it all goes. I feel like I'm getting attacked by ticks or some other type of insect in this tent as well. So we'll see how that all goes. It's kind of an unmowed area here at the campground. So zero complaints. Really, today was a little more type 2 fun than fun, but I enjoyed it just the same. Hello, May 3rd. It's mile marker 155.9, other side of the Paw Paw Tunnel on the Maryland side. Got my kind of tried and true picnic bench a little bit away from the openings of the tunnel. Everything went very well so far today. Probably a little bit better than I would have expected, given what could have been going on. Last night I had a great call with my girlfriend back home. It seems like everything is going well there. She's handling all 3 dogs and her therapy business all at once. It's a lot for her to handle, so it's much appreciated that she can do that. Allow me to go away for a couple of weeks, so that is good to hear. Our dog Bellstar, she is very attached to me, and I think she's finally gotten used to me being not around, so I'll be back soon. I woke up to drizzle around 4 in the morning and thought, well, that's suboptimal, and then went back to sleep because the idea was that I thought that it would not start raining until later in the day. We did get some showers overnight. I thought, great, wet tent. It is what it is. I woke up around 5 minutes of 6 and I could hear more drops hitting the tent. Thought, oh my gosh, it's still raining. This is going to be a long day. And when I got out of the tent, it wasn't. It was another one of those situations that happens here on the canal where you get a little moisture in the trees and then it'll drip on your tent and it'll make you think that it's raining when it really isn't. So, I guess that happens in a lot of different places. I was sort of in a headspace where I really wanted to get moving because I knew it wasn't raining. It looked like it might be raining soon. And I just wanted to get out of there. So I did. And I hurriedly packed up. I didn't make any overnight oats like I had the previous night. And I was just too tired. Yesterday really took a lot out of me. And I realized it, right before I was about to nod out, and I thought, I should probably make them. And I'm kind of glad I didn't because it would have kept me there for a little bit longer. And as it turned out, I think getting out quickly was a boon to me, as you'll hear in a moment. I had my leftover Reuben from last night at the bar, and I set that. I had a power bar as well. I got that into my frame bag, and I donned my rain gear, expecting kind of the worst. As I headed out, I was on the C&O. That's where the campground was. And it's interesting because on the Western Maryland Rail Trail, there's a bunch of different cutouts where you could conceivably camp and get away with it if you're doing it stealth camping style. And I think I may consider doing that in the future, just because then you're on the Western Maryland Rail Trail. It's just faster to be on the paved surface. And I did know that about maybe 5 miles up there was a cutout that was going to work. And it did end up working out for me. As it turned out, it got steadily hotter And I mean, I was sweating, so I'm rolling up my sleeves, taking off the rain jacket. Then the sun starts peeking out, which was pretty amazing. And really, it's been beautiful weather ever since then. A little bit warm for my taste, but hey, everything is warm for my taste. It does look like there's going to be some rain later, but based on where I'm at right now, here it is. It's about 11:30 in the morning, and I'm more than halfway done. It does look like, if you look at the forecast, that I'm going to hit some rain. But if it can hold off until, say 8 o'clock tonight, that would be even better for me, because I would love to be rolling in there dry. And even if it started raining while I'm in town, that's so much more preferable. Where I'm going to be camping tonight, I think I've mentioned this before, has a picnic shelter. And I've frequently, because it seems to rain a lot when I'm in Cumberland, I'll set up the tent underneath the shelter, and then we'll have a dry tent going into tomorrow. I don't know what to expect with tomorrow, but of course I got the big climb out of Cumberland, so we'll kind of see how that all goes. I took a lot of short breaks today to get here in the first half. And I've been really focusing on hydrating and eating, because yesterday I did not do a good job of that, and I just didn't feel good for a lot of the day. Now, I think there were a lot of different factors in that, but I think really focusing on hydrating has made me feel a lot better. And I'm sitting here in front of a big foot-long Subway sandwich that I bought last night that I'm ready to tear into. The fact that you're getting this recording, minor miracle, just telling you. There is one thing that I really want to mention is that the new extension of the Western Maryland Rail Trail, again, this runs parallel to the C&O. It's been there for years, a 22-mile section. Well, they just extended it past Little Orleans. This may not mean much to you, but it's another at least 6-7 miles, I think, which is amazing. And it's a great surface. And it's really thoughtful and well done. And one of the reasons that had been around preventing its expansion, because they've been wanting to extend it for years, even into West Virginia, is that there's all these old rail tunnels have become bat habitats. And so they hemmed and hawed over the years. And I think they came up with a great solution. And that is, they said, okay, well, we'll just hop on the C&O for the 2 miles around that one tunnel, and then we can keep extending it from there. And that was just a great idea. Best of both worlds. I mean, I think preserving habitat's really important. And as a result, we got this extra extension of the paved trail. Really, really fantastic. I'm cool with all of that. Stunningly good. The rail trail continues past Little Orleans. Call it a town is kind of an overstatement. It is got a very famous bar, which was very close because it was 8 in the morning. I've been there a couple times. It's interesting to go there. I don't think it's really a hugely important stop, but it's there. The area around there is crazy now because they've built a whole huge modern parking lot for all the folks who are going to be using the rail trail now. And it's unrecognizable to me, and that's pretty well. From there, I met another guy from Louisiana outside of New Orleans. He is still not caught up with me. He was going in this direction. He's going to end up in Cumberland. He's going all the way to Pittsburgh. He's doing it in more time, which is great, because I think if there's one thing that I've learned on this trip is, I'll tell you what, I do this trail typically in 3 days, and I think that maybe I'm getting old. I don't know. But I think that there are certain times of year, I think that if you're doing it at 60 miles per day, you don't get to stop a whole heck of a lot, especially if the trail conditions are bad or you're not feeling so hot. Take your time and do it more. I think that's just a better way to do it. I have not seen the trio from yesterday. They were in a hotel, so I suspect they got a much later start. They may or may not overtake me today. And I'm not even sure if they're going to end up going all the way to Cumberland today. It makes the most sense. There's not a whole heck of a lot between Hancock and Cumberland. You kind of really want to do it unless you're camping. In any event, Paw Paw Tunnel, of course, I'm on the other side of the tunnel. Nothing crazy. There was some graffiti apparently, which is making a lot of locals really upset. Just between you and me, it was actually kind of beautiful. I just wish they would have picked a different spot than a historical freaking tunnel. But that's just me, my weird taste. The tunnel was fine. The surface is so uneven. A lot of people feel like, it's cheating to walk through or whatever. I don't know. I think that it's so uneven and so rutted and so full of potholes. Yeah, you may have a light and you may think you'd be able to ride through it. It's not comfortable to ride through, and those potholes take you by surprise. So I hop off, and I still use my light, and I still find the footing to be a little dicey. There is water that kind of drips down here and there. It is super cool. It's awesome. It's a great experience. It's one of the highlights of the trail. But I never consider riding through it. I think I tried once and ended up striking the side of the wall of the tunnel and was like, okay, I'll stop doing that now. So that's it for the first half of the day. Second half of the day looks to be a little bit interesting. The trail conditions have been great. This is a really great section of the trail because it recovers well from any rain that happens, dries out nicely. And I was just saying this to the guy I met from Louisiana. When the C&O surface is dry, I prefer it to the Gap. I think it just is a little bit harder in a good way. And I just kind of prefer, I don't mind a little bit of ruts and stuff like that. I hate the roots, but, I just prefer it because I find the Gap surface to be a little bit softer even at its driest. So everyone's got their own opinion on that. But in any event, I think that it's going to be really good conditions between here and Cumberland. I've got less than 30 miles to go. I've been making much faster time on the nicer trail, or on a non-wet trail surface. Should it rain, I expect it to be slower, but we'll just see how it goes.
Maybe some unusual background noise here for this recording. So the second half of the May 3rd entry from mile marker 184.5 / mile marker 0 in Cumberland, Maryland. Not to go all talking heads on you, but you may ask yourself, my God, why would you camp there? There is no better spot, basically. There are train tracks between the two various campsite options that are available. You can get a campsite that is free and has similar nasty train traffic and more of it. This is actually a sideline here. Or you can pay $12 for it and be at the YMCA and have a cover over you should you need it, like a picnic shelter, a shower, free rent of the facilities, and now Wi-Fi that actually stretches out to the camping area, which is remarkable to me. Unfortunately, it doesn't work on my laptop for reasons that technically make no sense, but so be it. The third day of tours tends to be the charm. I have found that sometimes one or both of the first 2 days of any given tour can be a little, it's tough. It's tough to get into touring kind of mode. Sometimes it depends on your time of year, your fitness, things like that. I know the last May, I struggled, I think, on the first day in Missouri, maybe even the second, but the third day, boom, I was all good. And this was my third day, and it was definitely by far my strongest day of cycling. It was helped by the fact that trail conditions were much better. The dry surface was good, probably about as good as the C&O gets. It was hot enough to do my patented pump and dump shower at the Potomac Forks campsite, which is the third or fourth one from the end. It's unusual because it's on the other side of the canal. It's the only one that's like that. And it affords a little bit of privacy in case there's anybody biking. And there never is, because it's pretty remote. And so what I do is I'll fill up, in the first instance when I ever did it, I filled up my pannier. But I brought along a 4-liter size, like basically water bladder, and that's plenty. Fill that up and then just dump it on my head. Take off the shirt, basically just do a real cool down. And that was a fantastic and really necessary thing for me today because I was really running hot. I don't know how hot it got, but it was muggy and well into the 80s, and my body's just not tuned for that by this time of year yet. It's funny, I was really looking forward to the heat, and my body is not attuned to it, so that kind of makes sense. Strangely enough, I didn't see or encounter any of the Cumberland-bound folks that I've run into the entire day. Once I went ahead from the gentleman from Louisiana, I did not encounter him again. He was riding solo. He seemed to be doing okay. He seemed to be having some speed. He's on a Surly, pretty good bike. But he did not end up overtaking me despite the fact that I felt like I took a bunch of breaks. The trio, as I mentioned, didn't run into them again. So I don't know where they are. I don't know what their plans were, if they were all going to make Cumberland or not, but didn't run into them. I got a signal again and saw that rain was bearing down on the Cumberland area, and I knew that it was only a matter of time until the rain came.
So I redoubled my efforts to get to Cumberland and beat the rain. And as it turned out, I made it. My phone was pinging me constantly for the last, I'd say maybe 6-7 miles, saying, yo, it's raining. It's raining. And it wasn't, thank goodness. But you could definitely tell it was coming. And so I rolled right in. And originally I wasn't going to go to Crabby Pig this time. That's sort of my traditional restaurant, but it does run a little bit higher of a bill than normal. So I was thinking of going someplace else, and I just didn't feel like I had the time to kind of look for a place because I just didn't even want to get hit by the rain at all. There's also an area where you can keep your bike covered up. Basically, the freeway is right there. And that worked out really well. So I went in there, had my beer, had this enormous thing of like fettuccine Alfredo, which I never get, but I was like, because, calorie bomb, right? I was like, I deserve this. So I got that, and I have some left over, but I don't know if that keeps real well, so we'll see what I end up doing with that. The YMCA campsite, let me tell you a little bit about this. That's where I'm at right now, as I mentioned. The check-in was no earlier than 6 p.m., so I was able to wait out basically at Crabby Pig, and that worked out really well. I digested my food somewhat, but I ended up leaving in the rain, and I'm glad I did because the rain only got heavier later. It was quite a bit heavier when I was inside checking in at the Y. Speaking of, the folks here at the Y are really friendly. I've been here maybe 4 times, give or take, and they've just always been super friendly, and I've always had a really good experience with it. And, that's always just so nice to have in these types of situations. The place where I'm camping right now, it's a large field, but you do have access basically to a shelter, and I'm able to stay here until 8 in the morning tomorrow. It's interesting because it's a very late check-in. It's a 6 p.m. check-in, and it's a very early check-out, so they're pretty strict about all of that. And I guess that's just so that people don't linger and whatnot, because they do use this for other things. But the nice thing is that because I'm allowed to use the picnic shelter and to pitch my tent, this very, very heavy rain that came is not impacting any of my gear. And, it's not that my rain fly doesn't work. It works perfectly fine. But by being able to have a perfectly dry tent that I can pack up, it means I won't have to think about that element for the next, tomorrow basically. It does look like it's going to be good weather potentially for the next 3 days, maybe a little bit cloudy, not as hot, which I'm very grateful for. But also, it looks like this is getting the rain out of the system, which is fantastic, because tomorrow is, I'm not going to say it's a challenging day, but it's certainly got one of the more challenging hills of this section of the ride. I'm going to be having much more in the way of hills when I get into northeastern Ohio, from what I understand, although I haven't really looked at elevation maps or anything like that. I'm literally not prepared for Ohio. I know which direction I'm going. I know what I'm doing, but I don't know. Anyways, tomorrow is the first day of the Gap, and I've got a little bit of choose your own adventure. I'm looking forward to hopefully getting all the way to Confluence. Now, I've never done that before. I always talk a big game about getting to Confluence from Cumberland, but I think I'm going to go for it, because if I can do that, then the day after Sunday, it's not unreasonable to go from Confluence all the way to Draveau Cemetery, and that puts me basically in Pittsburgh. So that puts me a full day ahead. So if I do 2 slightly longer days, but not unusually long for me, they'd be both basically 60-ish mile days, then I make up a day, and then I can take a 0 someplace. Probably in Ohio is where it would end up happening. So I'm going to try to do that, because the utility of having that in my back pocket would be really good. Whether it's, outside of Cleveland or whatever, I think having that 0 in my pocket would be a really good thing to have. All right. Well, that is the end of day 3. That is the end of yet another wonderful C&O adventure. It's a great trail. It's my favorite. What can I say? But I'm looking forward to doing the Gap, because I haven't through-ridden the Gap in a while. And since it was scuttled last fall, I'm looking forward to taking it back again.
Statistics for part 1 of volume 14. Miles biked 184.5, flats 0, mechanicals 0, bad pizzas that became okay pizzas 1, camping nights 3, roofed nights 0, people I ran into had heard of Pedalshift before. 3, mile marker 44's Easter egged 1. And as always, we like to close out the show with a special shout out to the Pedalshift Society. Because of support from listeners like you, Pedalshift is a weekly bicycle touring podcast with a global community, expanding into live shows, bonus podcasts, and tour journals. If you like what you hear, you can support the show for $5, $2, or even $1 a month. There's one-shot and annual options if you're not into the small monthly thing. Check it all out, pedalshift.net/society. On to the Society. Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lane, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittis, Thomas Skadow, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Harry Telgadas, Chris Barron, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Stuart Bucket, Todd Stutz, Mr. T, Roxy Arning, Nathan Poulton, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Paul Culbertson, Scott Culbertson, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Greg Braithwaite, Sandy Pizzio, Richard Patch, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Dave Roll, Joseph Quinn, Susan Brewster, Drew Porter, Byron Patterson, Joaquin Robber, Ray Jackson, Jeff Fry, Kenny Mikey, Lisa Hart, John Denkler, Steve Henkel, Miguel Quinones, Alejandro Aviles Reyes, Keith Spangler, Greg Towner, Dan Gebhardt, Jody Zeranin, Lucas Barwick, Michael Baker, Brian Bechtal, Reinhard Biggle, Greg Middlemas, Connie Moore, William Gothman, Brian Benton, Joan Churchill, and new to the Society, Mike Bender, Rick Weinberg, and Billy Crafton. And thanks to all past and anonymous contributors for helping to make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.